We are engaging governments all around the world to adopt our 1 for 2 policy, which is that 1 gigabyte of data should not cost anything more than 2% of average monthly income for anybody. And I think that's one of the key takeouts I want to leave with you when after this presentation. So I've just introduced what we do at Alliance for Affordable Internet. We work through coalition groups. Next slide, please. Okay, so we work with different countries. We are less than 5 years old, so naturally we started small. But we work in all these regions. We work in, we've got most of our countries are in Africa. We work in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Liberia just recently, Mozambique, Myanmar, in Asia, Bangladesh is coming on board, and in Latin America we have Dominican Republic, but we're also looking towards Guatemala as well. So there's quite a lot of interest in the work we are doing to drive the affordability agenda across board. So basically, when I was asked to speak about this topic, about the internet infrastructure and pricing, I said, well, it's a very broad topic, but for me, I think that pricing is relative. And in order for pricing to be relevant to stakeholders, it means it has to be affordable. Now, let's look at internet access across the globe. And I'm sure in the subsequent slides, you're going to see how Africa is doing. If you think you've heard bad news from the first presentation, I think that you should just brace yourself up. There are 4 billion people who are offline, if you can imagine. Of the I think the world population is about 7.2 billion, and currently 4 billion people are offline. And that's a lot of people. And if you drill down even further, you find out 90% of that is in Southeast Asia and Africa. And if you drill down further, you even find out that in terms of the splits between men and women, we have more women who are offline as well. Now, all these people coming on board definitely would play a very big role in how we develop as a continent, and we need to start taking it very seriously. Now, in terms of, if you look at, when I talk about women, you see that women are 50% less likely than men to use the internet in a lot of countries. And during the break, I was talking about the potential of having a lot more women online and how it can inure to the economic benefits, development of our continent. And we did a study with Women Rights Online as well, and A4AI. And what we found out was that for every, we looked at different countries, but in Africa we pulled Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda as well. Of course, we didn't have a lot of, I don't think we pulled Francophone countries, but what we found out was that 37% of women we surveyed were internet users, compared to 59% of men. And then we found out that women who are more politically active, people who are politically savvy in the real world tend to use the internet some more as well. In terms of the education split as well, you notice that the more educated people are, the more likely they are to use the internet. And furthermore, when you look at this particular slide, it might look a bit busy, but just take a look at the areas that we highlighted in red. And you notice that in terms of the split as well, when we look at men versus women, how many women are actually using the internet, you find out that the widest gap is actually in countries like in Kenya and Uganda, specifically in the capitals. So you notice that even in the capitals, while you're having more people who are internet savvy, you notice that there are less women using the internet compared to men. And in Kampala, we noticed that for every 3 men who are online, there was just 1 woman. So there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. Nigeria was doing relatively well. It's still at 42%. But if you look at Cameroon, you notice that they're also quite low. So there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done in this area. And it all ties into why, in terms of development and the policies that governments need to do, we need to take a good look at how we can bring in all those people who are marginalized, or how we can get them to be interested in using the internet. On the next slide, you look at internet use across Africa. And this slide just speaks volumes. And I think from those from Niger can see what's happening to Niger when you compare it to the other countries. And it's very important to look at the three countries that are relatively doing well in terms of internet users. You find out that it's Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa. And then you look at the laggards as well. You look at Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire, Sierra Leone.
You left on Sierra Leone.
Well, we didn't have data on Sierra Leone. But, and that also goes to speak to some of the challenges we've been having in Africa, and especially in ECOWAS, is data, getting relevant data. And I think that's something we need to work towards so that we can get the data and use it to develop. And then if you look at, now you look at even the next slide, please. Okay, so we noticed that in a lot of African countries, people get access to the internet via their mobile phones. So we decided to look at, okay, what is the mobile broadband penetration in Africa? Okay, as well, let's look at the number of actual subscribers who are using, who have access to mobile broadband. And again, you can see what's happening to the back. I think the people at the back are wondering what's happening to Niger. I mean, down there. And obviously, this is like a wake-up call for us that there's quite a lot of work we need to do as well in this area. Next slide, please. So, again, I come back to the issue of affordability. What are the factors, we want to look at why internet cost is quite high across a lot of countries. And one of the things that we realized in the next slide is that in terms of accessibility, okay, the price of broadband for the lowest 20% of income earners, you realize that it's in terms of accessibility, you have countries like Zambia who are doing pretty well and have a target of less than 5%. And then you realize that the device cost also is a factor. That how much are smartphones, how much are laptops, how much do the cost of 1 gigabyte of data cost? All these things are factors that affect how people are able to afford the use of the internet. So if you think about the fact that we think that a smartphone is about $50 and then you find out that, just at $50 means that 20% of the population cannot afford the phone. Getting the phone is one thing. Even somebody gave you the phone as a gift, you still need to buy your data. And how many people are able to afford the data? And for us at AFOIA, that's why we are focusing on the fact that the 1 gigabyte of data should not cost you more than 2% of your average monthly income. If you are paying more than 2% of your average monthly income, it means that it is not affordable. And that's one thing that we need to look at. And in terms of the key factors that affect affordability and the pricing of the internet, I think one of the things is infrastructure cost. We've been at AFOIA, we've been doing a series of workshops and research around infrastructure, how much infrastructure is there, how much is being shared. And we recently finished research and a consultation process in Mozambique and in Ghana. What we realized, especially in the case of Ghana, was that there was a lot of duplication of infrastructure. So you find out that in one country, in one street, Airtel will come and lay cable, followed by MTN, followed by Glo, so you have so much duplication of infrastructure. And all that is cost. That if they were sharing that infrastructure, could have been, they could have utilized this, brought down the cost of their deployments, and also giving consumers more affordable rates. And so there needs to be an audit of infrastructure across countries. And so that you can decide, okay, I want to go into this area, government will map out so I'm going to be on this slide for a while, so please stay there. government is going to map up what needs to be used, which areas are lacking, and then decide what incentives to give for people to go in there. And then another area you need to look at is spectrum. Spectrum has been seen in certain countries as a cash cow. So that's how governments, regulators tend to make money. Say, let's sell the spectrum very expensive, and then you find out that once the spectrum is sold too expensive, the person buys it and needs to recoup their money. So at the end of the day, the services that come from it are too expensive for users as well. And so governments need to look at spectrum and make sure that there's fair pricing of spectrum so that it doesn't become a hurdle. The other thing is the end user device cost. In quite a number of countries, and I think in West Africa, which ECOWAS has done, I know ECOWAS has done quite a bit of work in the area of removing taxes of handsets. But you find out that in countries, for instance in Ghana, they still have 10% tax on mobile handsets. So in countries where you have a high taxation on the end user devices like laptops and all the mobile phones and all the services, the devices that are used to access the internet, it definitely affects the price of getting access to the internet. And that's something that regulators and policymakers need to look at. Another area is the lack of demand-driven initiatives. So you find out that in countries where, for instance, there's an excess of infrastructure, so you're looking at a lot of capacity at the subsea cables on the coast. And then you find out that, well, people are not using the services because they probably don't have e-government. And I think it shows because the previous presenter talked about the poor e-government services. And this is one area where I think that ECOWAS can really push so that we can have more e-government services, which will drive the demand and bring down the cost, the general cost of using the internet. The more users there are online, it's economies of scale, the cheaper it is for consumers. And then also content. People don't see why the internet is relevant. So you find out that in a lot of places, the kind of services that are there, even the language in which it's in, people are not digitally literate. They don't see why they should be using the internet and the relevance. So that's something that as governments and as policymakers, we can all work towards to be able to make sure that we have the right content in place. In terms of the earning potential or earning power, well, that's a lot that, it's more left to the economics of the country, but I believe that's also a factor which affects internet affordability and also goes when we talk about pricing. And then I've also talked about taxation. Next slide. So we've talked about a lot of the problems, we've looked at the statistics. Let's look at in terms of the solution, what action must we take? And I think the first thing is that I've been talking about the 1 for 2 affordability target, which I think that is something that can be adopted, which is making sure that 1 gigabyte of mobile data is priced at 2% or less of average monthly income. And I think that is something that we should be looking at seriously as a target that we can work with. Also, in terms of prioritizing a lot of the public access initiatives, this is something that quite a number of our countries in ECOWAS, we have universal service funds. What are we using the funds for? We are taking quite a percentage from private sector and operators. It goes into a fund. This fund can be used to bring connectivity to the most marginalized groups as well, and even smaller groups like women groups as well. And I think Madam Chairperson Mary talked about a wonderful project in India. I'm sure she can elaborate more about it during the break. And also, in terms of policies that we're looking at, earlier on I mentioned about gender, and I think it was a little misunderstood, but I was talking about women, and as I told you, the gap between the users, women users online versus men, makes it very critical for us to make sure that we have policies which are focused on getting a lot more women online to close that gap. And then, finally, we need to have an integrated approach to policy making. So in the next West Africa IGF, we shouldn't just be seeing ICT ministers associated, we should be able to have a cross-sectoral approach, because it's going to, you need to look at utilities, you need to look at roads, you need to look at other services, so that the infrastructure that is developed is all together encompassing, and it's able to achieve what we want to achieve as a region. So in a nutshell, I think there's quite a lot of work to be done in the area of infrastructure, internet infrastructure and pricing, which will yield to affordability for our consumers. And there is quite a lot of work to be done, but FYI, we have quite a lot of expertise, and we should be able to help in that regard. Thank you.